Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Bit of a slower week this week. Got some interesting things to talk about, but, you know, we got Daredevil Born Again, and I think that's really the biggest thing that's been on everyone's mind. Obviously, if you've seen the first two episodes, there's a lot to talk about, so we will definitely get to that later on in the episode. But guys, thank you so much for joining us again on another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Make sure, if you are watching on YouTube, I'm going to try to keep the intro short here. If you are watching on YouTube, or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and comment down below with what you think about any of the topics. And if you are listening, or if you're interested in listening, we have audio-only platforms. The podcast, the Access Blockbusters Pod, is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast. So if you want to check it out there, make sure to leave a rating and let me know what you think about the podcast there. A little bit of a shorter intro, guys. I just want to get into the topics today. Let's get into them. Alrighty, guys, here's something that shouldn't be too controversial, I hope. Sometimes Vin Diesel just says stuff. Really odd stuff. That is not a controversial thing. He's been a part of the Fast and Furious franchise. He's been a part of a pretty public beef with Dwayne Johnson that's kind of been weird and all over the place, and I don't even know what to make of all that. And he is Groot. These are all things that, aren't facts, I suppose, but, things that are pretty well known about him. Vin Diesel who voices Groot. The guy who says, I am Groot, 3 times. Not 3 times, those 3 words. He says, I am Groot. Okay, great. And he does a very good job of it. I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from thinking that. I just, he's a very interesting figure in Hollywood. And the point of this, I'm not trying to go into the TMZ rumor mill or anything like that. The point of all of this introduction is to say that the other day, Vin Diesel, once again, said something very odd. And it has implications for the blockbuster movies that we usually cover, in particular, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So Vin Diesel went on social media, and I guess he was talking about a lot of projects that he either was going to make or wants to make, and he brought up, unsolicited, unprompted, this MCU project that apparently he thinks everybody wants. I'm just going to read this verbatim, and then we're going to talk about it. So this is what Vin Diesel wrote on Instagram, I believe. Quote, Disney wants their Planet X, which some say is Marvel's most anticipated movie, haha. The film where Groot returns to his home planet. Okay, so first of all, I have to get this out of the way. He said haha, so yes, of course, he might be sarcastic when he says, which some say may be Marvel's most anticipated movie, except for the fact that he said things like this before, and there has been no indication in the past that he's been anything but dead serious about these kinds of things. Like, of course, everyone, wants to see the Groot movie. And look, I love Groot as much as the next person. He's a great character. The literal evolution of the character, going from Groot to Baby Groot to Teen Groot to, I guess, Alpha Groot is what they were calling him in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. He's great. Great character. And Groot and Rocket was great. And James Gunn has talked publicly about the fact that if he had been given the green light, he would have made a Rocket and Groot movie, which ended up being a majority of the story, for Rocket at least, in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So there were some bare bones plans, at the very least, to make a Groot and Rocket movie. But again, Vin Diesel just says stuff sometimes. And it doesn't, I don't get any indication that, he's ever really ironic about things. He said a lot of things about the Fast and Furious franchise, like, oh yes, we're gonna make them and it's gonna be great. And it turns out that it's, it's crazy and way over budget and things like that. And of course the public feud with Dwayne Johnson. I'm not sitting here to disparage Vin Diesel at all. Whatever he says, whoever he is, obviously as long as he doesn't, harm people and whatnot. But if he just wants to be weird and quirky and say things, that's totally fine. The only reason I'm bringing this up again is in the context of this quote, because I don't know what to make of this. First of all, he says, which some say is Marvel's most anticipated movie. I have to assume he's kidding, but nothing indicates to me that Vin Diesel is the kind of person who jokes about these kinds of things. But okay, let's just say he's kidding. And he says Disney wants their Planet X. I guess Planet X is the planet where Groot comes from. So he's really saying that, the MCU movie, Planet X, I guess they would call it, which is, I don't know why you'd call it Planet X when, it's Groot, right? Probably call it Groot. But, he's saying, look, the MCU wants it, people want it, let's make this Planet X movie the movie where Groot comes from. And I just have to say, in no world is this movie happening. Not because people don't love Groot, not because people don't love Vin Diesel as Groot, not because people don't love the Guardians of the Galaxy members, but because it's just too much in terms of the quantity of the MCU right now. Maybe 2 years ago, they would have greenlit Planet X as a TV show or even a movie, right? Because that was the point when Bob Chapek was in charge and he said, more content. And if Vin Diesel had gone up to Bob Chapek and said, let's make Planet X, maybe he would have gotten it greenlit. Who knows, right? But Kevin Feige is back in charge. And it seems like now they're being very, very, very targeted with the kinds of projects that they're making now. We're starting with Thunderbolts. We're going to Fantastic Four First Steps. Ironheart is a vestige of the older regime with Bob Chapek, but it's, I'm hoping it's going to be good, just like how Agatha All Along, I believe, was a vestige of the more content era, but it still ended up being pretty good, pretty solid. And then you get Wonder Man, you get Vision Quest, you get Avengers Doomsday, Avengers Secret Wars, Spider-Man, not a No Way Home, Spider-Man 4, and then you get all these other projects like Shang-Chi 2, definitely has to happen, Black Panther 3 has to happen, Doctor Strange 3 has to happen, so we're getting back to the old cadence, right? And if Vin Diesel really wants to make a Planet X movie, I don't know, special presentation, I guess, because there's no world in which this happens. So I just thought it was weird and kind of odd, and I'd really like to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you guys think about this? Because Vin Diesel did post this. He said, I'm going to read this quote again, quote, "Disney wants their Planet X, which some say is Marvel's most anticipated movie, haha, the film where Groot returns to his home planet." It's one of the most baffling things I've really seen in a long time, and I don't know what to make of it. Maybe by the time I'm done recording this, we get confirmation that Planet X is the next movie after Avengers Secret Wars. I have no idea. So, guys, let me know in the comments down below. What do you make of Vin Diesel's comments? Do you think he's just being funny? Do you think he's just wishful thinking, putting it out there? Or do you think this is a serious thing? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. Alright guys, so I was going down a YouTube rabbit hole the other day, and I stumbled across some old MCU trailers. By old, I mean, I don't know, the past few years. So not that old, not, Iron Man 1 kind of trailers, just in the past few years. Some older MCU trailers that I hadn't seen in a while. And I started to watch them. And it got me thinking, the MCU is definitely going through a phase, no pun intended. I mean, it's definitely struggling, right? There's no doubt about that. And even those of us who love the MCU acknowledge it's struggling, right? You don't get your Captain America, Brave New World, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumanias, Doctor Strange, The Multiverse of Madness, all films, by the way, which I think are fine, ranging from to decent, right? But not, we just didn't get that during the Infinity Saga. So the MCU is not in the best place. But one thing that I actually just hadn't thought about in a long time, until I stepped back and started to watch a lot of these trailers, is that their trailers have not slowed down at all. And I want to kind of take a step back and just think about that for a second, because maybe, I'm not saying that we should just never get excited when we see an MCU trailer again. That's not the point of this. The point is to say, okay, the MCU trailers that have come out, and I'll talk about a few key examples here, are great. And they get you really excited because they're showing you the best glimpses of the movies. But in reality, good trailers don't mean great films. Bad trailers don't mean bad films, right? Because it's all about, trailer making is an art form in itself. Trailer making is taking a lot of clips, right? Key clips from a movie, trying not to spoil the entire plot, although some trailer companies, don't care about that at all. Batman v Superman, third trailer, I'm looking at you, the one with Doomsday in it. But the trailer company is usually taking the clips, trying not to spoil the movie, and making it artistically satisfying so that the clips fit together really well, even though they're not related to one another. The music, whatever music they decide, if they get a composer to, make a cover of maybe a Star Wars score or an MCU theme or whatnot, make it emotional in itself, right? The Black Panther Wakanda Forever first trailer was just an emotional piece in itself. And that's amazing. That's an amazing feat. That's an amazing accomplishment. And I just want to think back to Phase 4 and Phase 5, rather. And think about those trailers. Because, yes, Phase 4 and Phase 5 have been hit or miss. But the trailers to those movies have been awesome. And I think that part of the reason why, for me personally, I get so sad and disappointed about, the state of the MCU right now is not because it's terrible and not because it's tanking completely. The MCU can pick it up right away with Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four. But it's because the promise of those trailers had always been there and shown what those movies could have been. Right? It showed the best parts of those movies. It showed what those movies could have been. So let's take a look back really quickly and see. Because look, again, I think the MCU has had really good trailers for a long, long time. And I'm realizing now that the quality of those trailers have not been dictating the quality of the movies lately. And I think that that's interesting. I think that, again, leads to my disappointment in certain cases because I'm like, wow, the trailers, looking back on them, showed the best version of what the movie ended up being. And I think that that's really interesting. So first of all, let's go all the way back. WandaVision, I think the trailers were fantastic. Falcon and the Winter Soldier trailers were awesome. Loki trailers were awesome. And WandaVision was awesome. Falcon and the Winter Soldier was okay. And Loki was a mixed bag. The Hawkeye trailer I thought was really good. Then you get into your Black Widows, right? And I think the Black Widow trailer was fine. But actually, that movie ended up being probably better than a lot of other movies that had lesser trailers, in my opinion. I think that that's interesting, right? Let's move on to Eternals. I like the Eternals trailers a lot, and I ended up liking those movies quite a lot. What else is there? Shang-Chi. The Shang-Chi trailers were pretty good, right? Really solid trailers, and I loved Shang-Chi. So you're starting to see there just isn't a correlation here. Because, in general, those MCU trailers have all really hit hard. Spider-Man No Way Home, I maintain, actually, if you look back on it, the hype for Spider-Man No Way Home was what really carried that film's marketing. But those trailers in themselves were good, really good. And I loved Spider-Man No Way Home. But those trailers, not the best, but they were still really, really good. The Moon Knight trailer, really good. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness had a couple really solid trailers, and that movie ended up being fine. It ended up being okay. Thor Love and Thunder, I thought, had a couple really, really funny trailers, and that just ended up being okay. Actually, I'm moving on to Ms. Marvel. I thought Ms. Marvel's trailer was not that good. Or it wasn't bad, but it was okay. And it had that Weeknd song, Blinded by the Lights, but it was okay. And I love Ms. Marvel for the most part. So that's interesting. She-Hulk might have been the first series where I kind of went, oh, I don't really love these trailers. Because I think She-Hulk somehow captured the parts of the show that I really didn't love. And I ended up actually enjoying the show, I think, a little more than the trailer. So that might be the exception to that. Obviously, I talked about Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Loved that movie. Loved those trailers. Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. I actually thought the trailer was just fine, and I really liked the Holiday Special. We move into Phase 5. I had really been looking forward to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania because I thought the trailers were so good. So good. And the movie ended up being fine. It ended up being okay. Guys, remember though, I'm not going to go in order for the rest of it. I'm just going to talk about different projects. The Guardians trailers were fine. The Guardians trailers were good. But, remember Echo? Remember how good the Echo trailer was? I thought the Echo trailer was really good. And the project ended up being okay. I love the Secret Invasion trailers. I thought they were great. Guardians trailer, Guardians 3, I thought was fine, and it ended up being pretty good in my opinion. And let's go to Captain America: Brave New World. I thought the Captain America: Brave New World trailers were really, really good because it showed the best parts of those movies, and the way that they fit together, the way that they were edited to being a really paranoia thriller. It was a story within itself. And ultimately, I think that that's just an interesting thing to note here. Deadpool and Wolverine, I think that's the last project I didn't mention. Deadpool and Wolverine, and Werewolf by Night, but Deadpool and Wolverine in particular, I think those trailers, actually in hindsight, again, were riding the hype of a Spider-Man No Way Home because they knew, the directors, the people making the trailers knew exactly what people were tuning in for. Looking forward to Wolverine, looking forward to the Spider-Man and the multiverse aspects of Spider-Man No Way Home. They knew. So those were a little different. But in general, right, my point is that while the MCU has fallen, and I again, not fallen too far, but fallen, the trailers, I think, continue to show the promise that the MCU has. Because every single one of these trailers, maybe except for She-Hulk, and again, I like She-Hulk more than the trailers. I did. But every single one of these properties shows that the MCU still has that promise. These projects still have that promise. And of course, you can make a good trailer out of almost any movie. That's fair. But I think that what these trailers are doing is capturing the essence of what the best version of these movies and shows are. Right? You look at your Moon Knights, you look at your Captain America: Brave New Worlds, you look at your Echoes, your Secret Invasions, right? And I think that gives me some hope. Not because the trailer people are making these movies. I mean, look at 2016 Suicide Squad, how disastrous that was when a trailer company, fought with the studio and made one of the cuts of the movie, right? But I think that it just gives me optimism that the MCU still has that, magic in it. It just needs to really draw it out and bring it to the forefront. And here's hoping that Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four are examples of movies with great trailers and great movies. So, guys, what do you think about the MCU trailers? Do you think that they've been as good as they have been always, or do you think that they've fallen off as well as the quality of the MCU projects themselves? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, so we talked a little bit ago about the casting of, or I should say the reported casting of John Lithgow in the Max reboot of the Harry Potter franchise in their own television show. We talked about John Lithgow being reportedly cast as Albus Dumbledore, one of the most important roles, not just in the Harry Potter series, but basically in all of, fantasy cinema, fantasy fiction in general. So it was a big deal. And I talked about in that article that, yeah, it's great. You get the best talent that you can possibly get, and John Lithgow is obviously incredibly talented, but also that he was a little bit on the older side, in my opinion. And if you were going to carry on this Harry Potter series for 10-ish years, well, you'd want Dumbledore to be around because, I guess, spoilers for the books that have been around for a long time, but Dumbledore is a very important character. In fact, I think his most important book is probably book 6, and he has a little appearance in book 7. So it was an interesting casting, to be sure, if it in fact goes through, because nothing's been set in stone yet. But anyways, we have some more casting updates to two more very important professors in the Hogwarts faculty. One in particular being perhaps one of the most important characters next to Dumbledore in the Harry Potter franchise, those being Professor Minerva McGonagall and Professor Severus Snape. So this is an article from Deadline, and this is what it says, quote, HBO is closing in on two more main cast members for its high-profile series adaptation of the hugely popular Harry Potter fantasy books. Oscar and Emmy-nominated actress Janet McTeer is in negotiations to play Professor Minerva McGonagall, sources tell Deadline. Additionally, Emmy nominee Papa Isidu, and again, I apologize if I mispronounced these names, Papa Isidu, one of the first actors identified for the series, is closing his deal to portray Professor Severus Snape, I hear. They are poised to join John Lithgow, who, as Deadline reported exclusively, will be playing Professor Albus Dumbledore. So, a little less controversial here. Again, not that, John Lithgow playing Dumbledore is controversial. I just think the age thing is something that they have to deal with at some point, because even if John Lithgow, God willing, he has perfect health throughout the entire series, maybe at 85 years old, he's like, I don't really want to do this anymore, come to set every single year and do not super physically rigorous things, but still, it's not like he sits in a chair. Dumbledore just sits around all day, although that is kind of the joke that he doesn't really do anything. But again, he is a pretty active character, especially towards the later half of the series. So, that's the one thing. But with these castings, the article mentions Emmy Award nominated and Oscar nominated actors such as Papa Isidu and Janet McTeer. It's a huge deal because you're getting high profile talent, and it's not just name brand people either. Because again, for the most part, I knew about John Lithgow, but Janet McTeer and Papa Isidu before the Harry Potter rumor mill was going on, I didn't really know about these actors. But the article points out, and it's true, that they are nominated for awards. They are very talented actors in the business, and so again, I think that it's a really good sign that these kinds of actors are very willing and game to be a part of this franchise. And I think it's also great that they're not just going for the highest profile British talent. And again, John Lithgow is American, so they might be going after American people as well. But anyways, I think that it wouldn't be a bad thing, right, to see really high profile actors in there as well, as long as they're good actors. But I still think that it's actually an even better sign that they're going after just the best people possible. So I think this is all a good thing. Now, as to the commitment, right? Because McGonagall, I think, for Janet McTeer, it's not as big of a commitment. One of the funny things about Janet McTeer, I believe she is 6'1", so she is an imposing presence, I would imagine. I haven't seen anything that she's in, but 6'1", the only other actress that comes to mind immediately that's that tall is Allison Janney, who I believe is 6 feet tall. And in The West Wing, right, she is not imposing as in scary, but she is a presence because she's very tall and she has, a very cool, calm demeanor about her, and she has, the ability to get people in line. And I think McGonagall, in a similar way, the late, great Maggie Smith played her a little, stern, right? But gentle when she needed to be. And I think that's kind of a character trait of this character. I haven't read the books in a while, but, from what I remember from the movies and the books. And Snape, obviously, is a very complicated character. So Papa Isidu has a lot of material to dig into because Snape obviously has many layers to him. He's very cross and a very mean-spirited character towards the beginning, but then it's revealed later on that he has a lot of complicated feelings towards Harry Potter and of course his mother as well. So, and his relationship with Voldemort, his relationship with Dumbledore, it's all going to be explored. So I am actually very excited to see this because I think you get these characters in line, and obviously they need to cast the kids. The kids are the most important, but if they cast the kids right, then I think we're off to a great start. So guys, what do you think about these new castings, or reported castings rather, for the Harry Potter series? We have McGonagall, and we now have Snape as well, joining Dumbledore in this reported cast list. Let me know in the comments down below. All right, guys. So over this past week, it was about a week ago at this point when you're listening to this. It depends on how you look at it. Maybe it could be jaw-dropping, game-changing, universe-shattering MCU news came out. Not even news, pictures, images. Because about a week ago, we got to see, allegedly, I'm going to say allegedly many times, concept art from Avengers Doomsday and likely Avengers Secret Wars as well. So here's the deal. I am not going to be using pictures. If you're watching the video format on YouTube, I'm not going to be using those images in this segment. Probably going to be using adjacent images of Hulk and Doctor Doom and Black Panther, whatever, because I don't know if they're real. I don't think anybody knows if they're really real. I think that's, we'll talk about that in just a second. But in case they are, these are very sensitive images. And so I I don't want to get in trouble with anybody. So I'm not going to show these images. The thumbnail, again, will probably be something Doctor Doom adjacent. But yeah, if you want to go check out these images, they're all over the internet at this point. You can probably find them on Google Images. But again, I'm not going to probably show them on my YouTube channel. Anyways, so yes, a week ago or so, we got a report or a leak or whatever this was that a bunch of concept art images came out of Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. And in these images, there are many interesting things. For example, we get to see our first look at Doctor Doom. It's an incredible design. He looks so formidable. I don't think we get to see Robert Downey Jr.'s face, so I'm very curious to see, is he disfigured? Does he look exactly like Tony Stark? Are they going to change him up a little bit, And that's what I'm most curious about, but the armor looks great. We get to see Doctor Doom, in kind of a court situation with, I'm going to assume, multiversal variants of Yelena Belova, Doctor Strange, I think Sue Storm. And then we get to see other combinations like Star-Lord and White Vision. We get to see Star-Lord, Wong, and the Young Avengers. So it looks like Star-Lord's going to have a pretty big role in the upcoming Avengers movies. We also get to see what looks like a new Black Panther. I forget the actor, the first name, because everyone on the internet seems to is saying, at the very least, and we don't know if this is true because we don't know what the concept artist's intent was, but it seems like they modeled this Black Panther, and it's not Chadwick Boseman, obviously. It's based on, and I forget his first name, but it's Idris, and no, not Idris Elba. That guy's first name is Idris. This guy's last name is Idris. I don't remember his first name, but people think that they're modeling this new Black Panther off of the guy, and again, we just don't know if the concept artist had that in mind. It seems likely, right? It's there's a resemblance. So there's that. We see a planet of Hulks. We see Jennifer Walters. We see Bruce Banner and probably Scar, but it could be multiversal variants of the three of them as well. What else do we see? We see, a lot of images of maybe Molecule Man, I think was another one. So there's a lot of stuff that came out about this. Okay, here's the thing. Until we get any confirmation as to whether this is real or not, I don't think I can bring myself to get excited about this. And I'm going to go a step further. I think even if these are real concept images, I don't think they really do much for me. I think there are ways in which they get me excited insofar as it looks like they're making the movie. And that's a no-duh kind of thing. It's Avengers Doomsday. What I mean by that is that these Avengers films have been pretty plagued, right? Kang Dynasty goes to Doomsday, Robert Downey Jr. comes back. They've been in all sorts of limbo and all sorts of weird states of production. Russo brothers came back. So just, if these images are indeed real, then what that gets me excited for is that, okay, they're really heading in a direction that seems like they've got something mapped out. Let's go. Let's make these Avengers films. It looks like we're getting a lot of different characters involved, and it looks like they're handling it in such a way where if you didn't see She-Hulk, then you'll probably not even know who this actress is, Tatiana Maslany, but she'll be in the movie, and you'll kind of, it'll be a multiversal variant, so people would just be like, oh yeah, multiverse Hulks and stuff like that. But for those of us who watch the show and know the character, obviously it'll be more impactful. That kind of thing. That's great, especially the Young Avengers, right? Most of those are TV characters. We see Wiccan and Speed in there as well. So I think in that way, you can set it up to where the Russos are saying, well, look, if you didn't watch every single TV show, then you don't need to, and that's great. That's, again, if these images are real. And we don't know that. I don't know that. As of the recording this video, at least, I don't know that. But the reason that I just can't bring myself to get too excited about this is for one reason and one reason alone. It's concept art. And concept art is great in terms of giving you an idea, because concept artists for these MCU projects, for a lot of, Disney projects, for a lot of DC projects, just the big action-oriented projects, right? They hire professional artists and they make concept art, and they make a lot of concept art so that the directors can get a better idea of, oh, this is what it would look like, wouldn't it be cool if, and et cetera, et cetera. But concept art, I don't know what the exact ratio is for most projects. I would guess it varies depending on how much production changes, depending on how much they want to use from the concept art, etc. But I would guess that a really significant portion of the concept art never gets executed. In fact, it's not even that it doesn't get executed on the big screen. It's that it gets changed entirely. There were concept art, leaks of Iron Man with a Doctor Strange cloak and Doctor Strange with Iron Man armor. And that was going to be part of Infinity War at one point. Did it happen? No, absolutely not. In fact, I think it even made it to toy leaks, right? And that never happened. Of course, we can't forget about Captain America Brave New World. There were leaks of the leader design in concept art, and I think that was official concept art. Did that ever happen? No, he looked completely different in Captain America Brave New World, right? On the one hand, yes, it's exciting that we're, if it's real, it's exciting to see, okay, Doctor Doom looks really good, How they execute that in live action, by the way, is a completely different thing. You can make anything look really good in art form, but executing that in in quote unquote real life, it's a tall task. So I think that, at the end of the day, how much can we glean from this? I don't know. I mean, the Star-Lord White Vision pairing was certainly not anything that had been remotely close to the top of my mind ever at any point. So, now that I see it, I go, okay, that could be kind of interesting. Paul Bettany, Chris Pratt seemed like they would have good chemistry, depending on White Vision kind of being the guy who doesn't take jokes and Star-Lord just joking around. I think that could be a very interesting pairing. But again, I need to see some plot details. I need to see a trailer before I start to go, okay, we're getting there. And even then, we know that MCU trailers can be deceptive and whatnot. So I think concept art is cool, right? And at the end of the day, if it does happen to be in the movie, we can look back on it and go, wow, really, that's really awesome. And, there were concept images of the Guardians and Avengers in Infinity War and Endgame and whatnot. So again, when you look back on it and if this all comes to pass, great, that's awesome. At this point in the game, I don't know how much I can buy it and how much I believe in it. So I'm still in wait and see mode. The movie hasn't even filmed it. It's concept art. So again, any number of these things in these pictures could be real in the movie, regardless of if this concept art is actually legitimate. And it could all be, thrown out. Multiversal, Black Panther and all that, who knows? Who knows? So anyways, guys, have you seen these concept art images? And do you think that they're actually a part of the movie? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, we have entered the realm with this segment's topic of what I would classify as interesting. This is very interesting. This segment, hopefully the title in itself was not necessarily a spoiler, because, for those of you who haven't seen the first 2 episodes of Daredevil Born Again, I think that just the fact that Foggy and Karen are going to return for season 2, not a big deal. But for those of you who have, there's a lot to talk about, right? So this segment is going to contain spoilers for episodes 1 and 2 of Daredevil Born Again. Hopefully it's been a few days when this segment comes out, and so you guys have seen it by now, and we can talk about it safely. And I'm hoping that the thumbnail and the title of this segment don't, inadvertently spoil too many people, but it's going to be interesting, right? So let's talk about this news that Foggy and Karen will be coming back for Daredevil Born Again season 2. Again, spoilers for the first 2 episodes. Here we go. So yeah, at the end of the first episode, at the beginning of the first episode, Foggy Nelson dies. And it has become pretty polarizing amongst the fans, I will say. But it had happened, and we're living in a world now where Foggy Nelson is no longer there and Karen Page has moved to San Francisco. Or are we? Because Brad Winterbaum, who, like I've been saying over the past couple of weeks, Brad Winterbaum has just been talking a lot about all sorts of things. He's been talking about Daredevil Season 2, Daredevil Born Again Season 2. He's been talking about other MCU shows, Agatha All Along, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, and just been revealing a lot about the future of the MCU in television, I guess. I don't know, maybe that's his job. And he gave a quote after the premiere of Episode 1, and he said this. This is his direct quote. Just a direct quote, and then we'll talk about what it means afterwards. Quote, without going into spoiler territory, I will say that both Deborah Ann Wall, who plays Karen Page, and Eldon Henson, who plays Foggy Nelson, are coming back for season 2. End quote. Okay, that quote in itself, after what we saw in episode 1, is really baffling. It is the same kind of feeling of excitement in the sense of, oh, okay, they're coming back. That's exciting. We love Karen and Foggy. I love Karen and Foggy, so that's exciting. It's that same feeling, though, I got when Robert Downey Jr. was announced to be Doctor Doom. Why? How? Because, yes, you're excited. I'm excited to see Robert Downey Jr. again in the MCU, and the Russos seem convinced that they have a great idea of how to bring him back in a way that's meaningful and not just cheap, right? So I trust that. In the same sense, I think I trust the showrunners of this, Daredevil revival, Daredevil Born Again. I think so. I mean, based on the first couple episodes and based on what they've been saying about the show, I think I trust them. But how? Why? I mean, there are only, in my mind, because again, the show can totally zig when you're expecting it to zag and all that. So, in my mind, though, there are only a few options, I would say. Number one is the most obvious one, flashbacks. And yeah, I mean, it would be nice to see them again in flashbacks. It would feel a little cheap, and it would be a little weird for Brad Winterbaum to be like, oh, don't worry, they're coming back, when they're only in maybe 5 scenes of the entirety of season 2, and they're just little flashback scenes, in between season 3 and Daredevil Born Again or something like that. Again, it would be good to see them, and it would make narrative sense, I suppose, if, the show's crux is really about the death of Foggy Nelson. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if Foggy doesn't show up again in this season in flashbacks. I think that would make some sense, too. So maybe he continues to show up in flashbacks. The second option is a hallucination type thing, like we saw at the end of Peacemaker Season 1, where his dad was just kind of hanging out there. Maybe he's so haunted by that, or you think about The Amazing Spider-Man 2, when Gwen's dad is just hanging around, not a ghost, but just hanging around, right? Haunting Peter Parker. Maybe that's what's going on here, because obviously Karen can show up again. There are plenty of ways and reasons for Karen Page to show up again, because she's still alive and she's hanging out in the MCU. She's just hanging out in San Francisco. So that makes sense. So it's really a question about Foggy. So I think, again, number one option is flashbacks. Number two is just a hallucination or a ghost or memory or something like that. Number three is that he actually is revived. And 3A is that he's literally revived, kind of, this is DC obviously, but a la Lazarus Pit, he's somehow brought back to life by some mystical thing. And I don't know. I mean, Daredevil season 2 had ninjas and it had the hand, and Daredevil, the Defenders was dealing with a little bit more of a fantastical threat. So it's not like Daredevil is completely street level, right? There are some things that are more fantastical about the show, even the original one. But I mean, resurrecting a character with some magic, literal magic or whatnot, just opens up a whole can of worms, a whole Pandora's box of possibility, but also questions and problems potentially. And 3B is perhaps the route that I really don't want them to go through is multiverse. Because the problem with the multiverse, or at least the primary problem of the multiverse, in my opinion, is just that you can bring anybody back. And it doesn't matter. So yeah, I mean, if you bring Foggy back through the multiverse, that's fine. But then nothing matters. Like if Daredevil kills somebody, he crossed the line, I guess, but then just bring them back. If Kingpin kills Karen Page, it just doesn't matter. Just bring her back through the multiverse. So I don't know. I mean, that would be my least preferable option. I don't really see any other possible scenarios. I don't know how. I mean, I was not expecting body possession when they said they were bringing Chris Pine back for Wonder Woman 1984. So who knows, right? They can think of any sort of possibility. And if it's, if it fits the story, then fine. I think Karen Page, should come back, and I think that there's a place for her to come back. So I'd be excited to see her. As for Foggy, I mean, I love the character. Obviously, I was devastated by his death. And we'll talk more about that as we talk about episodes 1 and 2 in spoilery detail. But in terms of how he's going to come back, honestly, no idea. Those are the 3.5, 4 options that I have, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Let me know in the comments down below. How do you think Foggy's going to return in season 2 of Daredevil Born Again? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. Well, the Oscars have come and gone, and there's a lot to talk about. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the 2025 Academy Awards. So we'll talk about the winners. We'll talk about the results. We'll talk about even how my predictions stacked up. And spoiler alert, I think I did pretty well. Not to toot my own horn, not to give myself credit or anything, but I think I did pretty well. Anyways, we'll get to all that later. I'm being facetious. I mean, it's all not random. It's not completely random. I like to think that this year I paid more attention to the pre-Oscar races than ever before. And I obviously, for the first time watched almost every single Oscar nominated movie. At least the big ones, except for I'm Still Here, which again, I'm going to really try to see as soon as it's available on streaming or rent. Anyways, so that, this year was in particular, of interest to me because I had, a stake in it. And just in terms of, I watched all the movies, I ranked them. You can go check out last week's episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod where I ranked all of my favorite ones and I talked about my predictions, but we'll talk about that. And we'll also, I want to talk about the show itself and kind of sprinkle in some things here and there as we go along about the winners and losers. So first of all, and I say losers, snubs, not winners because they're all winners. Most of them, in my opinion, really deserve to be nominated. And we'll go on from there. So let's start out here at the beginning. And let's actually start out at the very beginning. First of all, they started out here with this montage about LA. And it would be remiss for us to say, to not mention what happened in LA a few months ago, or not a few months ago, a few weeks ago with the LA fires. And I think that it was a really good thing of them to bring it up and to be serious about it. And yes, of course, Conan made some jokes, but not at anyone's expense, but rather to really, lift up the people who lost their homes, and he brought out the firefighters, and I thought that was great. So the opening was a really beautiful tribute. And then Ariana Grande steps on stage and starts singing, and it's beautiful. And then Cynthia Erivo steps on stage and starts singing. And for some reason, this whole time, I'm sitting there going, wow, this is really pretty. I'm really glad they're here. They're showcasing the Oscar-nominated actresses, and they can really sing, and it's awesome, And then you hear the notes. You start hearing the jingles, right? From the very beginning of, or that part of the chorus of Defying Gravity. And Cynthia Erivo starts singing. And I'm not afraid to admit it. I started crying. I don't know what it was. And it's weird because in the theater, right? As I watched this movie, I've seen it twice now. It's powerful, that ending. And to me, I've said this before on the channel when I talk about Wicked, I grew up playing music. I grew up, listening to a lot of music. Music to me speaks almost as powerfully as movies do, if not even more in certain points. It's just hard to explain. In the art form, there's no hierarchy, but in the art form categories, right? There's visual art and there's music and there's, of course, many, dance and many different kinds of art, right? And in terms of art, movies, obviously, movies and television and storytelling have always been at the very top for me, right? But music is right there. And it's just hard to explain. I can't explain to you why when I hear certain notes or when I hear, music in a certain way, it just elicits emotion out of me. I can't explain that. And that's why I always say movie musicals, or just musicals in general, but movie musicals are so powerful because it's taking the combination of both storytelling and music and combining them. And that's just unfair. And so when I watch Wicked, both times, when she sings Defying Gravity, and especially at the end, tears come to my eyes, and it's so moving. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the LA tribute at the beginning, or maybe it was just seeing it live and being so unexpected and taken aback. But when they start singing, I just got so choked up and I got emotional because, again, it's just, to me, it encapsulates the beauty of that art. And I'm going to say it right now. I'm always liable to change my mind in these kinds of rankings and stuff. They're all snapshots, right? So when I made my top movies of 2024 at the end of December, I had Inside Out 2 as number 1. And I love that movie. I really do. But when I watched the Oscars and I heard them singing, Wicked became, and it was for a while. I just needed to find it out for myself. Wicked became my favorite movie of 2024. It's unbelievable. This was, to me, and I haven't seen every Oscars, I haven't seen every single ceremony or whatever, but to me, this was the best opening I've ever seen. It was unbelievable. So I was a wreck already at the beginning. That was not on my bingo card to cry, which was crazy. And then Conan came out, and I thought he did a great job. I think Conan is silly, right? Jimmy Kimmel has been doing it for the last few years, and Jimmy Kimmel, I like Jimmy Kimmel as a host. He's pretty good. He's pretty funny, and he has some good bits and stuff. I think Conan just brings a little bit more of that craziness, that offsets a little bit of the seriousness of it all. I think that the fact that he's just so silly and is willing to yell and make a fool of himself on stage, because Kimmel loves the bits. And he loves, he's not afraid to laugh at his own expense. But Conan is really on another level. He's chaotic, is what I would say. And it's really fun. So I really enjoyed his monologue. And I thought that his opening bit, the part where he was singing and dancing about not wasting time was so funny to me. And so, yeah, we went on and we started the show. So right away, we started out here. And I'm going to go to my predictions now. And I think the first, I could be wrong. I don't remember what the first award. That's right. The first award, interestingly enough, was Best Supporting Actor. I was not prepared for that. And that was Kieran Culkin. And so that was an early win for me. But then, right off the bat, I think the next one was a Best Original Screenplay. And that went to Anora. And I predicted A Real Pain, and I thought The Brutalist should have won. So to see Anora come out of there and win it, all of a sudden alerted me to something that would continue on for the rest of the night, was that I had but I had underestimated Anora, and I think that a lot of us had as well. Maybe not all of us, because, I think it had some momentum definitely going into that night, excuse me. But I started to look at my predictions, and there were some that I got wrong. And I looked at them and I said, those are going to flip for Anora. A couple I was still really surprised by, but we'll talk about those in just a second. So the night went on. I started out 2 for 4 because the other category that tripped me up very early was the Best Animated Feature, which I predicted The Wild Robot would win. And Flow didn't come out of nowhere. Like, Flow was winning those awards here and there. And so, definitely had to take it seriously. But I didn't know we had to take it that seriously because, and again, I haven't seen the film. So I could absolutely watch the movie and go, oh no, this is the best movie of 2024. I just haven't seen the movie. And I probably will at some point. But, Flow wins. And so then I was going, oh, well, now I'm 2 for 4. I started out 2 for 4 and I thought my whole night is ruined. My whole night is absolutely ruined. But then I went on a pretty good hot streak for a little while there, actually. I was something like 11 for 13 at one point. So I got every single one right through a good portion of the rest of the night. I think, let's looking at this list here, things like Best Cinematography went to The Brutalist. I thought that was, I thought Dune Part 2 should have won that, but it went to The Brutalist. Best Original Score went to The Brutalist. Production Design, Wicked. Sound Design, Dune Part 2. Visual Effects, Dune Part 2. Adapted Screenplay, Conclave. No big surprises for me. Best International Feature, I'm Still Here, beat out Amelia Perez, which I think, given all the controversies, makes some sense there. Best editing, and again, this was the one category that I just wasn't super sure about, so I picked Anora, and I thought Anora had good editing, and sure enough, Anora wins. And at that point, you go, okay, I think I see what's happening here. So then we go on, right? And the categories are winning, and at this point, I'm something like 11 for 13, and Zoe Saldana wins Best Supporting Actress. Adrian Brody wins Best Actor. We'll talk about those in just a second. I want to get to the Anora story of it all, and then we'll talk about some other highlights and maybe lowlights of the Oscars, and then we get to. So the screenplay one was what threw me off, right? A real pain I thought was going to win, and it turned out to be Anora, right? And at that point I was like, okay, all right, we'll see. And so then we get to the end of the night, and I'm sitting here going, okay, I feel pretty good. I feel like I could go very, very feasibly. I could go 15 for 17 because the last 3 categories that we had left, I think I was something like 12 for 14, and I go, okay, I feel really good about these last 3 categories because while I had not predicted Anora to really push that hard towards the end of this Oscar race, I had seen the writing on the wall enough to change my pick from The Brutalist for Best Picture to Anora because I saw the writing on the wall for Best Picture. But for the other 2 categories, Best Director and Best Actress, while I knew that Sean Baker and Mikey Madison, were really strong contenders in those categories, I thought that the other 2, my predicted winners, right, were so strong that they would not have been able to have been topped. And I think that Best Director in hindsight, I probably should have changed it to Sean Baker, but Best Actress we'll talk about in just a second. So I was watching, I was going, okay, 15 for 17, right? I was being presumptuous and whatnot. Best Actress, they get on stage. Emma Stone gets on stage. And she goes, the Best Actress Oscar goes to Mikey Madison. And I knew it was over. At that point, you just knew Brady Corbet was not going to win Best Director. It was going to be Sean Baker. And the Oscar voters had spoken. Now, look, I don't hate the movie Anora. I don't. You can go watch my ranking. I thought it was enjoyable. I thought it was entertaining. I look at it, though, and it's one where I just don't quite understand. I hated the substance, not because of any artistic anything or the storytelling. I knew exactly what they were going for. The storytelling was really good and all that kind of stuff. It just wasn't for me. I would never watch that movie again. It was so disturbing to look at. I can't look at that kind of stuff. The body horror is terrifying to me. But Demi Moore gave one of the scariest, most real, raw performances I've ever seen in my life. And I don't know. I think Mikey Madison, for the role that she was given, did a good job. I think she did a good job. But just stacking it up against Demi Moore, I just couldn't understand. So once Mikey Madison won, I just knew it was over. Anora was going to sweep. And so sure enough, they go Best Director, and Sean Baker walks up there and accepts the Best Director Oscar. And at that point, it was okay. It was obvious Anora was going to win. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, we know what's going to happen here. And I resigned myself to going 13 for 17, which I think, in all honesty, is pretty good. But I was a little disappointed that I don't know. You had to ride the Anora momentum to get to that point. A couple other notes before we wrap up this segment here that so again, pointing out that Anora had momentum really early on with screenplay and editing. The James Bond tribute for 10 minutes, was a big, I could say a lot of things that aren't appropriate, but it was a, let's just say a middle finger, to put it lightly, to Amazon for their takeover of the franchise, over the Broccoli producers, right? So, and yes, their real name is Broccoli. I'm not just making fun of them. Their actual name is Broccoli. So yeah, that was interesting that they spent that much time on a James Bond tribute. I thought Zoe Saldana's speech was very moving, even though most people have said she's given pretty much the same speech every single time. But, you can't blame her. I mean, it's the Oscars, right? It's the Oscars. And for the most part, honestly, as I was, going through the categories and as we were going through cinematography, editing, some of the bits, like Ben Stiller was really funny. Who was it? Scarlett Johansson and June Squibb. That bit about June Squibb being Bill Skarsgård, that was really funny. The firefighters bit was really funny, but it was mostly quiet. And honestly, I think that's fine. I didn't need drama because for the most part, the past few Oscars have been memorable for all the wrong reasons. So I think that's totally fine. But then the memorable part came when Adrian Brody took the stage. And Adrian Brody took the stage and started talking. And at the very beginning, if you caught it, once he gets on the stage, he goes, "Oh, they're already timing me." So he was aware of the time. And he gave one of the weirdest, most rambling Oscar speeches I've ever seen, where he was very well aware he was running out of time and just continued to talk. And it got to the point where he even told the orchestra to stop playing him off. And they did, which I guess respect, right? Out of respect for him. But he said stop. And I was like, okay, are you going to say one more sentence? And he went on for another couple minutes. And I was like, that's bizarre. So he gave one of the weirdest Oscar speeches I've ever seen. Again, I think he deserved the Oscar. I thought he was so good in The Brutalist, but that was really strange. And I will say, to wrap things up, I think the best speech for me, or at least one of the highlights for me, was Sean Baker's speech about saving theaters. And I think that's awesome. Let's really go out there and support theaters. And again, just his plea to make movies for the theaters, for the big screen, I think is a really fantastic thing. So overall, I'm pretty happy with my predictions, although I think that, again, you just kind of had to see the Anora wave coming, and I just wasn't prepared to put Anora in those categories for screenplay and I put it for editing, but for Best Director and Best Actress, I just thought Demi Moore. I would, in 100 times, I might have put Mikey Madison twice out of 100 times. I think I would have put Demi Moore's name if I had to redo it 99 times again. So I don't feel bad about that one at all. Flow, I just couldn't see it. I thought The Wild Robot had it in the bag. And Best Director, that one to me, maybe I could have flipped, before this. But again, I feel pretty good about the predictions. And I think overall the Oscars were relatively quiet, especially given how much controversy there was heading into it with films like Emilia Perez and Carla Sofia Gascon. So I think overall it was a pretty successful Oscars, and I had a good time watching it. So guys, let me know in the comments. What did you think about the 2025 Academy Awards? What were you most excited about, seeing the wins? What were you most disappointed in, seeing the snubs? For me, it was Demi Moore. I really wanted her to win, but alas, we can't have it all. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, everybody. Well, a new movie came out this past weekend, and it was actually from a very acclaimed director, none other than Bong Joon-ho, who directed the Academy Award-winning, and I would say stunner at the time, because this movie came out of nowhere and swept at the Oscars, Parasite. This is the director of Parasite. He also directed Snowpiercer, starring Chris Evans and Tilda Swinton, and that movie about the pig Okja. So he's made some really critically acclaimed films, obviously Parasite being his crown jewel, and it was a very, there's a lot of anticipation to see what he would do next. And what he did decide to do was an adaptation, I believe, of a book, and he decided to make Mickey 17. So that's the movie we're going to be talking about today. I saw Mickey 17, and I have some thoughts on the movie. So we're going to divide it up, as usual, with new releases into non-spoiler and spoiler. So the first section of this review will be non-spoiler. No worries if you have not seen the film. I will not spoil anything that you haven't seen in the trailers. So if you haven't seen the trailers and you'd like to go in completely cold, I will be talking about things in the trailers. So just be warned there, but no other spoilers aside from that. And then we'll be diving in the last little bit of this segment to the spoiler discussion. Just some things I wanted to touch on that I couldn't in the non-spoiler discussion, if that makes sense. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. So, just a little bit of context. I always like to give context because it's really important to know where the reviewer or the pundit or the person, whoever, is talking about the movie. It's really important to know where they're coming from, because I think, people can come into art and people can come into movies in very different ways, just based on their sensibilities, but also their background and how they view things and what they're interested in, what their sensibilities are. So I think it's always important. For me, I was one of the few people in the world, apparently, who didn't like Parasite. Now, the more I think about it, the more I liken it to something like The Substance this year. If you check out my segment where I rank every single Oscar movie that I watched this season, The Substance came in last. And that's not because I don't think it's a well-made movie, a well-directed movie, an incredibly acted movie. Demi Moore not winning the Oscar is still a little bit stunning to me. That being said, it's not because of any of those things, technically speaking, or writing or whatnot. It's just my sensibilities. The body horror, the grotesqueness of it all was just too much for me. And it's a movie I can never watch again. Some of the images are never going to leave my mind. It's crazy. Parasite, well, not obviously body horror in that same way, is a movie that I felt very similarly at the time. I think it came out in 2019 and won the 2020 Academy Awards, and for Best Picture and Best Director. And that's because, the end of that movie, right, and the entire movie really, it's a movie that the message seems to be humanity is terrible. Rich, poor alike, it doesn't matter. We can't escape it, and we're destined to be just terrible, awful people. The ending of that movie made me feel so disgusting. Just not body horror, not horror, but just in terms of how I felt about people. And that's a feeling that I hate, I'm not saying every movie needs to have the happiest ending. Like I said, Infinity War is my favorite MCU movie. It doesn't, it's not the happy ending I'm after. It's really rather the completeness, the fulfillment of what the movie is trying to be, and saying something that's meaningful and profound. And if the message is humanity sucks, I'm not going to feel great about it. So Parasite, to me, was not a movie that spoke, it didn't speak to me. So again, not on the technical level. We're writing, directing, all that kind of stuff. On a technical level, I've really nothing to say. And so I was very interested to see, okay, is Bong Joon-ho going to make another movie like that? Is he going to make a movie where it's going to be a similar feeling? Is he going to make a completely different movie? I had no idea. Then I started to see the trailers for Mickey 17, because let's be honest, I had no excitement, really, after seeing Parasite for Bong Joon-ho's next movie. But then I saw the trailers for Mickey 17, and I went, oh, wait, this is interesting. This is different, because this one looked more like a comedy, a dark comedy, a satire, a very interesting premise about clones and a sort of a dystopian science fiction world. I thought, okay, maybe this is different, because it's very clearly, facing as something very different than Parasite. And so I thought, okay, let's take a look. And the more I saw from trailers, the more I heard from critics, I was more and more excited. So I went to Mickey 17 actually relatively excited. And that's a big deal for me, compared to how unenthused I was after seeing Parasite for whatever Bong Joon-ho directed next. So here's what I will say about my experience with Mickey 17. I didn't have that same feeling I did after Parasite, where I was like, I don't want to watch this movie again. I hate how this movie makes me feel. Nothing like that. This movie is more quote-unquote conventional. And in an interesting way, because Bong Joon-ho is a very auteur director. He's a very artistic director. And I hear that, Warner Brothers gave him full reign for this movie, full control. And he just made the movie he wanted to make. And it's based on a book, I think. But even the adaptation, you still have to put your artistic touch on it. And so, interestingly, for me, this movie was a tale of three separate movies. And I'm not going to spoil anything, I promise. But just to kind of clarify my own experience with this film, a tale of three movies. The first kind of movie that's in this 2.5 hour film is a very interesting exploration of metaphysics, of philosophy, of ethics, of what is the soul, the body, the mind, religion, even politics. It's a very fascinating discussion of what is, those questions. I don't know if you guys have seen these as well, but in podcasts or even in classes in school, the question of how do you put a dollar amount on a human life, that sort of thing. If you've seen from the trailers, you guys understand the basic premise of this guy Mickey, right, played by Robert Pattinson, who is an expendable, and he's able to be cloned every single time he dies, and he's able to go out and do tasks that nobody else wants to do, right? And so it naturally brings up all of those questions, and I think in an interesting way in this film. It wants you to ask and answer those questions for yourself and think about those things. And it's a very thought-provoking movie, while also being very interesting. In that vein, in this first sort of movie that I think is encapsulated in this film, Robert Pattinson is really great. I mean, I don't know if he's going to win an Oscar. I don't know if he's even going to be nominated for an Oscar, but his performance is unlike anything you've ever seen before. This is the same guy. And I had to tell myself this a few times, because it's almost impossible to believe this is the same guy who was Batman a few years ago, and he's going to be Batman again. His voice, you've seen from the trailers, is different. It's higher pitched. It's intentionally a little bit more grating, but it's a very interesting choice that works, I think. And then the clone version, it's not like, I think in The Flash they did it okay, right, where the two personalities are very different, obviously, but I thought the one was a little bit more annoying and whatnot. This is the case where there are two very different personalities in these two different bodies, and Robert Pattinson gets to play them very different, but it's in essence the same character, but it's still differentiated, and I think he does that amazingly. He does it really, really well. So I really enjoyed that from his performance. He does great. On a similar note, I think other actors like Steven Yeun and Naomi Ackie, they do a great job. We'll talk about Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette in just a second, but I think that the acting really elevates the material here. The second kind of movie that's within this movie, Mickey 17, going back to Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette, who are the other two main actors in this film, is a bizarrely campy, absurdist kind of movie. And there are scenes in here that you're just watching and you're going, I don't understand. Like, this in itself is somewhat interesting. And if you had positioned this to me as a comedy, like a pure comedy, I might have been laughing. If you had positioned this to me as some kind of, satire or I mean, it is a satire, but, I think a comedy, I would probably have been laughing at some scenes. But there are some scenes where Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette are so off the rails and doing something so crazy. And there's one scene in particular that I'm sure you'll know once you see the movie that, again, it's a funny scene. I laughed a couple times in that scene, but it's hard to laugh at this movie because it's sparring and clashing with the other part of that movie that is so serious and so wanting to talk about the metaphysics of it all and of the other serious aspects of the movie. It wants to be funny. It wants to have its cake and eat it too. But it comes into contrast so jarringly with some of these scenes that are so oddly campy and bizarre and sometimes cringe-inducing. I think intentionally so, but nonetheless cringe-inducing. And I just didn't know what to make of it. Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette are clearly going for something. And that something just didn't quite work for me, honestly. So this was probably the weakest part of the movie for me. But then the third movie within the movie, right? The third movie within Mickey 17 is actually a very generic movie. I'm not going to go into detail about what this part is, and it'll be pretty obvious to you from after you watch the movie. And I'll talk about this more in the spoiler discussion. But it's a pretty generic movie, pretty generic science fiction film. And I'm watching this, some parts of this movie, and I'm going, we've seen this before. Like, there's nothing, I get it. There's nothing new under the sun. I get it. It's not like we can all just make totally original and unseen things, in stories before. I get that. But this movie, there's a decent portion of this movie that I'm going, wait a second. I get it. Bong Joon-ho is a really creative guy. And I'm watching a pretty generic science fiction movie. Not that it's uninteresting, not that it's boring per se. I think, again, really what it comes down to is if Bong Joon-ho, and I think I would prefer the first out of these three, right? The philosophical, metaphysical satire. I would have preferred that. That movie, that third of the movie, I would have preferred. But if he had made just that movie, great. If he had made a really absurdist comedy, great. Maybe it could have been really funny. I laughed a few times in certain parts, even though I felt very uncomfortable laughing because it was just weird. If he had just made a science fiction movie, great. Instead, I think he tries to do too much in this movie. And that's really the problem. Because again, I don't hate the movie. I don't really even dislike the movie. I think the movie's interesting. It's a very interesting movie. And if you like Bong Joon-ho, if you like interesting science fiction, if you just want to see a movie that's, gonna make you think, I think this is a good movie to watch. I don't know if you're gonna like the movie. And I'm not gonna go so far as to say I think the movie's great. I just think it's an interesting movie to have watched, and I don't know if I'll ever watch it again. But I really think it comes down to what made it not connect with me as much is the fact that this movie is clashing with itself. There are parts of the movie, again, that are so just generically science fiction. And again, that's not a bad thing. I think I love science fiction. I love the tropes. All of it great. But then it clashes with these really absurdist scenes. And then it clashes with these really interesting thought discussions about metaphysics and the existence of the soul and all these sorts of things. So at the end of the day, I don't dislike this movie. Like I said, Robert Pattinson gives a great performance. I think Naomi Ackie is pretty good. Steven Yeun is pretty good. I think that Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette are doing something, and I don't know what that something is, but, maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. I personally didn't really love it, but it is what it is. And I think this isn't a movie to watch if you just like movies, if you are interested in movies and you want to see something different. Because it is different. It is very different. But at the end of the day, if somebody asked me, can you recommend this movie to me? And if they're just sort of a general movie-going audience member, I might be on the fence. I might be like, yeah, if you have time, if you want to spend the money, if you want to see something interesting for 2 hours, maybe. But it's not a ringing endorsement. So those are my thoughts on Mickey 17 in the non-spoiler section. Now we're going to talk about the spoiler section here. And again, if you haven't seen the movie, just make sure if you want to go check out the movie, go check it out, and then come back to watch or listen to this spoiler discussion. If you don't care about spoilers, welcome. Let's get into it. Really, I wanted to touch on the three different aspects that I talked about. I think it was a really helpful framing device for me to think about this movie. And so we'll kind of flesh that out here in the spoiler discussion as well. But quickly going to Robert Pattinson, I think he did a great job. And truthfully, the whole time I was like, this guy's Batman. That's incredible. I don't know how he did it. And then again, you see in Mickey 18, not Mickey 17. Mickey 17 is sort of the mild-mannered character, but Mickey 18, you kind of see, oh yeah, the Batman voice kind of comes out a little bit, the gruffness. And I'm like, that's impressive. He did a great job. He really did. I think that, other characters like Steven Yeun is fine for what he is. There's the whole subplot with the drug that they're taking felt very superfluous, honestly. And we'll talk about that dinner scene with Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette. But getting back to my framing. So the first part of the movie, right, the metaphysics, super interesting. The idea that they're going to space, the idea that they need expendables, the idea that there's this disgruntled politician who failed and is now going off to space, the idea of the themes of colonization and invasion and even supremacy, like racial supremacy that Mark Ruffalo was going on about, like euthanasia and all these different things, eugenics. It's all super interesting discussions within the context of this movie. Again, talking about how these things are terrible, but these people are tricking themselves into thinking that, this is the best thing for human society. And I think that, again, those discussions are really fascinating. Also, the discussion about multiples, the thing about the guy who has 3 multiples, that was really interesting. I love that. Loved hearing about that. And I thought that was all great. And I really liked, Mickey 17 and Mickey 18. So that movie I would have really watched if it had just been the whole movie. But then you get to the Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette of it all, the sauce of it all, if you will. And I don't know. It's hard to take it seriously because the movie wants you to take it seriously. And then it wants you to really just indulge, right? In the dinner scene, which was funny. Like it was, I think if I had seen that scene and you had told me this is from a comedy with Mark Ruffalo and Robert Pattinson and Toni Collette, I would have been like, great, really funny. I laughed. The only time I really laughed out loud was when the painkiller guy was like, nope, doesn't look like the painkiller worked. That was funny. But again, it's clashing. And it clashes because it's not like these things happen just in separation with one another. These things are happening in conjunction with one another. Mark Ruffalo is on that snow treader or whatever, snow speeder, and he's like, I have to give my big speech. Meanwhile, Robert Pattinson is having this serious conversation with this alien creature. Again, we'll talk about the sci-fi-ness of it all. And then Naomi Aki is bringing out that little baby alien thing. And it's like, all these different things just don't fit together really well. And so that was jarring. And then the third thing is just a generic alien contact movie that's in there as well. And that was really surprising to me because I can get the first two. I mean, I may not like all of what Bong Joon-ho has to say and do in his movies, but he's imaginative. He's very creative. But then, I don't know if it's a source material thing, but the whole stuff about the aliens and talking to the aliens and why didn't they save me because they wanted to talk to me and they could, wipe me out and stuff. It's like, okay, I think we've seen this before. I mean, I felt very surprised just how, tried and true all this stuff was. Again, not bad by any means. But when you put all these different things together in the movie, it felt weird. It felt very strange. And maybe that was the intent. For me, didn't really land. And I appreciate it if it landed for other people. But I think that this movie just kind of suffers from a lot of different things going on. Because say what you will about Parasite. I know a lot of you guys probably love Parasite. It was very focused. It had a very clear intent. I know there was a second act reversal where the whole basement scene, right? And that was, again, it's within the realm of the movie. And I think the closest scene to that in this movie was when those creepers come out of that rock and they start shooting at him. I think that scene actually was a little bit absurdist, but it worked. It really worked in the movie because it was a heightened tension kind of scene where Mickey 18 is trying to kill Marshall, the Mark Ruffalo character. So I think that worked. I just think, again, I don't dislike the movie. I think it's a fine movie, but I'm just a little baffled by how it didn't fit together as well as I hoped it would. So those are my thoughts on Mickey 17. Guys, have you seen the latest Bong Joon-ho movie, Mickey 17? And what did you think about it? I'd be very curious to hear if any of you guys have seen it and what you thought about it. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. This is a day that we've been waiting for such a long time. I've been waiting for this day for such a long time. I try to put out those immediate reactions as soon as I finish watching those episodes, and those are really excited. I'm all hyped up. I'm talking super fast because I want to get those videos out and just trying to share my thoughts immediately after watching those episodes. But this is a chance for me to just slow down and talk about my thoughts more in depth on episodes 1 and 2 of a show that I never thought was coming back, Daredevil Born Again. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion for episodes 1 and 2 of Daredevil Born Again. So if you have not seen those two episodes, no worries, but just make sure to save this video for later and save this segment for later, wherever you're watching, if you're watching on the podcast or if you're watching the audio only, it doesn't matter. But make sure to come back a little bit later and we and join us then, and we'll talk about Daredevil Born Again. But for those of you who have, we will be diving into the first 2 episodes of this new MCU show. So without further ado, let's get into it. Before we do, just a little bit of context for those of you guys who are unaware. So Daredevil Born Again, first of all, Daredevil has been making his little appearances here and there in the MCU for a little while now, since Spider-Man No Way Home. Actually, basically only 2 years after Avengers Endgame, he showed up in Spider-Man No Way Home, which is really exciting. Matt Murdock was back in the MCU. At the time, we just kind of assumed, this is going to be a situation where, same actor portrays the role because they're just so iconic in it. So yeah, it's just going to be the same actor, but it's going to be a completely different Daredevil. That was my assumption, and that was always going to be, I think, the case up until a certain point. So then, Daredevil shows up in Spider-Man No Way Home. He then shows up again in She-Hulk Attorney at Law, and he actually shows up as Daredevil, with the yellow helmet, but still Daredevil. And then he shows up again in Echo for a little bit. And at that point, production on Daredevil Born Again had been underway for a little while. Daredevil Born Again was announced with that big Phase 5 announcement, I think, when they first unleashed the Kang Dynasty announcement. And, everyone was super excited. I was super excited. Vincent D'Onofrio was coming back. Kingpin was coming back in a big way in Hawkeye. That was another scenario where we were all like, I guess they just love Vincent D'Onofrio that much that they're just going to use him, use the same actor. Totally fine. That's great. And so we moved on from there. And then we started to get hints that production may not have been going as smoothly as we had all hoped. And not that things were going poorly, but I think the direction that they were going in was perhaps not as ideal. Now, at that time, because Bob Chapek, who had been in charge, and he had really put the mandate out for there to be as much Disney Plus content, as much Marvel content as humanly possible, and I think Daredevil Born Again was kind of a result of that. Not that they wouldn't have made Daredevil Born Again without this mandate, but just the fact that I think, they would have probably taken their time a little bit more, but they had to kind of rush this into production. 18 episodes of Daredevil Born Again, and they just kind of went into it. And so Kevin Feige stopped, and he said, we're going to redo this. And they basically redid the whole show from that point. They had shot something like over 50%, I think, 60%. And they just said, no. I mean, I'm sure that there are some shots in these first 2 episodes that are from that original footage that they shot. But I think a lot of it was really net new footage. For example, Karen and Foggy, and we'll talk about Karen and rest in peace Foggy, they were not in the original cut of this show. They were not in the original footage that they shot. Vanessa Fisk, she was originally going to be played by a different actress, and instead they brought back the same actress from the first show. And these characters, Karen and Foggy are not appearing in probably more than a couple episodes. I mean, Foggy's dead, and Karen is probably not going to show up again for a little while. Their presence in the story is very integral, and so is Vanessa Fisk's, right? So it's kind of hard to imagine, this show, in its current state at the very least, not being some representation of this new storyline that they're going with. So I think that that's interesting. But anyways, we went on from there. And then we also got the announcement that not only was Daredevil Born Again being retooled, but it was being retooled under the guise that it was now going to be part of the Netflix canon. So not only were we getting Daredevil again, not only were we, being reintroduced to Matt Murdock and all the casting crew that we loved from the first 3 seasons, but also we were going to be we were going to be connecting these to the original show. And also John Bernthal was going to be coming back as Punisher, Wilson Bethel was coming back as Bullseye. It was all good news from there. So we waited patiently, and now we're ready to talk about the first 2 episodes of what is, I don't know, maybe one of the most anticipated MCU shows ever for me personally. And by the way, in anticipation of this show, I just didn't give myself enough time, but I have actually started rewatching the original Daredevil series, and I've been loving it, by the way. I loved it the first time, and I'm loving it again. I'm only about halfway through season 1. The goal was never to finish it by the time we get to Daredevil Born Again, but my goal is going to be to try to finish it sometime around all 3 seasons. Try to finish that around the time that Daredevil Born Again ends, so that I can just roll right into a rewatch of Daredevil Born Again, because I think that would be really fun, especially given how this show ends. Because, I mean, having watched only about 6 or 7 episodes of the first season, the death of Foggy, which we'll talk about in just a second, was still just devastating. It was way more devastating than it would have been if I had just jumped in, having not seen the original show for a long time. And I can't imagine after watching 3 seasons and then jumping into it how much more devastating it's going to be. So we'll talk about that in just a second. So here we go. Let's dive into the actual episode. I took notes, and to be honest, I said this in my immediate reaction, I think there's a lot more to talk about in episode 1. Not that episode 2 is bad by any means. It's not. I think that in the grand scheme of things, when you can just hit next on Netflix or Disney Plus and watch the next episode like I've been doing, just continuing to watch the episodes as I have time, it's like if there are cliffhangers or if there are loose plot threads, you're like, oh yeah, we'll move on. And of course, I've seen the show before, so I know what's coming in at least in general, because I don't remember exact specifics. But in this show, we got to wait a week, so in this format. So I think episode 2 is setting up a lot of things. And again, that doesn't mean that I think these 2 episodes are perfect. I think there are a couple things here and there that I'm like, I'm not entirely sure I love that, but we'll all get to that in just a second. So anyways, let's start out here, episode 1. And as I take these notes, these are live thoughts basically as I'm watching the show. And you'll kind of see my progression here as we go along, because the first thing I said in episode 1 as we start out here is, it's so good to see the 3 of them, Karen, Foggy, and Matt, back together again. It has been so long. I mean, again, I had just literally this evening as I'm recording this segment, had watched an episode of Daredevil season 1. So I had just seen them on screen, but you know what I mean. It's just good to see them back again together in the present, but that's obviously not going to last. That's not going to last for long, right? So anyways, we have Matt and Karen, and I'm very curious to remember, or to rewatch season 3, because I don't actually remember what their relationship status was at the end of season 3. I have, as somebody who enjoyed the chemistry between Jennifer Walters, and Matt Murdock, and I guess we'll just dive into She-Hulk theories right now, because again, it doesn't matter. It really has no bearing on how good I think these first 2 episodes are. But it was something that I thought about, right? Because they give a lot of context here in terms of when Matt was Daredevil, when he was out and stuff like that. So if Matt Murdock right? He sees the death of Foggy, he almost kills Bullseye, right? And then for a year, he stops being Daredevil. So that means that he was Daredevil. He was with Jen before this scene here in Daredevil Born Again. So this is, again, a year passes and he's no longer Daredevil. And so I completely forgot what the relationship status was between Karen and Matt. I know obviously they were together for a little bit, I think, in the Daredevil series, but again, completely forgot what their relationship status was. And so I'm just kind of curious, when did he go to LA? What for? Why did he go to LA? He was just hanging out as Daredevil, wearing the mustard suit and whatnot. But anyways, I think it's interesting. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about that. When you guys think he went to LA? Was it just right before the show? Probably right before Daredevil Born Again or whatnot? Because it certainly wasn't after, because he wasn't Daredevil. And I had a theory later on as I was watching the episode. I was like, maybe he just went to LA to kind of escape it all. But then I was like, no, because he said he wasn't Daredevil, and that wouldn't make much sense. But anyways, that is all an aside. It doesn't have any bearing on the show itself. So then, we get to this bar scene here at Josie's, and I like how they're setting up the legal focus, right? Foggy and Karen, Nelson, Murdoch, and Paige. I really like it. I love, how the camera pans in and out as Matt starts to hear things, right? Things are going on. Foggy's on the phone. And then we get reintroduced to Bullseye, Benjamin Poindexter. Again, it's been a while, so I don't exactly remember where we left him off at the end of season 3. But he is. I remember season 3, because Bullseye, let's be honest, right? Some of these comic book characters, can be quite silly, depending on how you portray them, right? Not that Colin Farrell's portrayal in the Ben Affleck movie was silly per se, but it was a little more, out there. But the version of Bullseye in Daredevil, I remember very, very vividly, was scary. Like, whenever Bullseye went up against Matt Murdock in season 3, you were on the edge of your seat, because he was so formidable and so ruthless. And that version of Bullseye is right back here. And so Matt suits up, he's back. You just can't help but sort of internally cheering, or for me, letting out some actual cheers, and he's great. The music is back, and then Foggy gets shot, and it's just like you kind of see it coming, and you're watching it, and you're going, is he going to come back? Is he going to kind of be in a coma the whole series or whatnot? And then you kind of realize, no, they're just starting out the show, and they're killing Foggy, and he's gone. And obviously, on the one hand, right, you hate it because you want Eldon Henson to stay around, and it's abrupt. I wonder if people who haven't seen the original series, what they're going to think about this. Like, oh, I guess just his friend died. It's a good setup in that way. If you haven't even seen the first 3 seasons, you can at least understand, oh, his friend, really close friend, died, and it set him on this path. That makes sense. But for those of us who have seen the first 3 seasons, it's really sad. It's really devastating. And Karen's reaction, Deborah Ann Wall, who plays Karen Page, just her reaction to that is so visceral and so real, and it's shocking, it's really shocking. And all the while, you're hearing Foggy's failing heartbeat as the action is just so intense. I love the action in this first chunk. It's not, I don't think, just trying to copy, be a carbon copy of season 1 or the original seasons of Daredevil, but it's that same DNA of just one shots and long takes and really, keeping the steady camera and focusing in on the action and letting the actors do their movements and the martial arts. It's great. And Bullseye, he's just ruthless. He is ruthless. The flashing lights as well. It's so incredibly intense. It's also interesting, I guess. So the entire point of that sequence was Bullseye just trying to get revenge on Matt, because as he was climbing up to the roof, I was like, what's the point? Like, where's he going? But I guess just the whole point was him trying to get revenge on Matt, because that's really what it seemed like. In his trial later on, they're like, do you want to talk? And he's like, nope, I'm good. So yeah. And Daredevil pushes Bullseye off the cliff. I thought off the roof. I thought he actually died, and the intent was the same. Daredevil didn't really care. Daredevil crossed that line. He was going to kill Bullseye, and he didn't really care. But Bullseye is alive, and in the first 5 minutes, I'm really glad that I took the time to rewatch some of season 1 before this, because you feel that so much more when Foggy dies, and it's really sad. So we head into the intro, and I do miss the old intro, but as we're watching this new intro, we're getting into the new music, which then transitions into the old theme. I was like, I really dig it, because the imagery is everything in New York crumbling, and then this version of Daredevil rising up from all of it. And I think that symbolizes Daredevil born again. And I think that's going to be a big theme as we head into this season. We get reintroduced to Wilson Fisk. Vanessa is running the criminal underworld, criminal empire. And I think it's interesting because they are They are, referencing Echo. They never mention her by name. They never mention Spider-Man by name, even though he's referenced in episode 2, Punisher as well. But, they do reference the events of at least the end of Hawkeye and Echo as he's recovering, and he got shot in the face. And so I guess Wilson Fisk went away for a while, and Vanessa's not too happy about that. And then we get some kind of B-roll camera footage. It's this BB show, right? So this is the niece of Ben Urich, one of the reporters in the original Daredevil series. And it's interesting because Daredevil has always had Batman parallels, in my opinion, in terms of the way that they portray him from the Netflix series, mostly from the Netflix series compared to the Nolan trilogy of Batman movies. And I think it's interesting because it's a very similar arc to The Dark Knight Rises, where everyone's like, where's Batman? Where's he gone? Or even in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 at the very end, where they're like, where's Spider-Man? He's gone, and our hero's gone. And he's gone. He's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I've crossed the line. And I think that makes a lot of sense, but it's an interesting place to have Matt Murdock be in this new show. He's also, though, in his revenge arc, right? He's very bitter, and the scene where Deborah Ann Woll shows up again, it's a really good scene where she shows up at the trial and they're talking on the bench, and she's like, I'm in San Francisco, I just came here for Foggy, and they're just two people who are grieving, and you can tell. I mean, it's a testament to how good the actors are, Charlie Cox and Deborah Ann Woll, because you can tell these are two people who really care about each other, but are just so embittered and in such grief even a year later that it's forcing them to stay apart. And I think that's beautiful acting on their part. And so Matt says, I'm going to let the system run its course. I'm not going to be Daredevil anymore. But then surprise, surprise, Wilson Fisk is running within the system. And I think that is the conflict. That's the game that we're playing here. And I think that is really interesting. So then we get introduced to Wilson Fisk's political machinations, and we get introduced to Michael Gandolfini. You'll let me know how to pronounce that in the comments. I'm terrible with pronouncing names. Who's playing a guy named Daniel Blake. And I'm not going to lie. I'm not super enthused with this character so far through the first 2 episodes, because he's just sort of being a Gen Z hype man kind of guy, like, oh, I'm just this guy. Everything's cool, man. Everything's cool. And I was alluding to it in my immediate reaction. There are some parts of this, Daredevil Born Again that, like I said, in general, the show has the DNA of the first 3 seasons, but it feels newer, right? It feels like it's been updated. It feels like it's been more, not modernized per se, but it feels more in line with the first, with 2025, if that makes sense. I think Michael Gandolfini's character is, I'm just gonna call him Daniel Blake. Daniel Blake feels more in line with that. He just kind of feels like, oh yeah, 2025, let's just be cool and TikToks and whatnot. And I'm like, okay, he's talking about memes now, and it just doesn't jive with me so far. We'll see where his character goes. I'm sure he's gonna have a much bigger role to play, but I think that's interesting. And then we get introduced to, well, actually, I should go back there. Well, because I was going to talk about Matt and Heather. I believe Heather is the therapist's name, and there's an interesting twist that goes on at the end of the second episode with her. But I do like how the show is very political. I've said this before. I really like politics, lowercase p politics, not really capital P politics. Just the political nature of things, like Captain America: Brave New World. I said the best parts of that show, or that movie to me, were really the political things, like the international intrigue, the treaties, the fight over resources. I think that all was really interesting. And I like how this show is diving into, okay, this guy who is, a criminal overlord, or kingpin, I guess, kingpin, right, is now running for mayor. I will say, and this is not the channel, it's not really the place where we go into politics like that. I will say, though, this is probably the closest I'm going to get to it, because this show has some very close parallels to real life. Just in terms of the fact that there is a political figure who is so polarizing, who is dividing the constituents right down the middle, and there are people who love this person, who hate this person, and this person has a history of doing things that some people view as criminal. Again, we're not going to get into it. We're not really trying not to get into too much of it. All I'm trying to say is I find it very interesting that this show, which was made before our own real-world election, by the way. It was made well before that, written well before that, but it still parallels a lot of the really interesting things with the rise of Wilson Fisk to mayor. And so I think that's something that I personally like, but I can see, being a little bit off-putting to other people. I just like, how things can reflect the real world and really speak to a lot of the deeper truths that are going on. So anyways, All that being said, Wilson Fisk is running for mayor, and I think that that's gonna be a very interesting plot thread going forward. Also using the assassination attempt to, from Maya to call himself a martyr. Again, real world parallels. But anyways, we get a scene now with Matt and Wilson talking to one another at the cafe, and I think it's the scene that was in all the trailers, but it's tense. I love it. I love the conversation between the two of them. He said he was trying to mentor Maya. Yeah, it's an Echo reference there, and it's a great conversation. It's amazing to see also that these two men almost respect one another, but then it's such a fragile truce, because they're like, you step out of line, I'm gonna crush you. That's Kingpin's line, basically. He's like, I'm gonna crush all the superheroes, and he's elected mayor. And Matt's like, if you step out of line, I'm coming right back. And we see at the end of episode 2, he's coming back. He's starting to come back here. And so, on the one hand, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of the election, the actual process of him being elected mayor. But on the other hand, I think it's great that we just get to see him be mayor, and let's get to that point of tension where Fisk is the mayor and he's just trying to crush the vigilantes. He's just trying to crush Daredevil, right? I think that's really, really interesting here. I don't love the choice to end episode 1 with a pop song. It happens at the end of episode 2 as well, in the credits. I don't know. The juxtaposition of Wilson Fisk looking down and Matt Murdock looking up, and I don't know if they're actually looking at each other, but I think that's a beautiful shot composition, and just ending it on pop song, that's another one of those things where it's like, it feels like, oh, that's very 2025, and I don't know if I love that. I really don't know if I love that. I actually probably don't. I think that's one of the weaker parts of this show. But anyways, it's a very minor gripe here, because I think that the ending shots, right, of Wilson and Matt being in juxtaposition would have been so much more impactful if it had been under orchestral music, but I digress. So episode 2, again, I don't have as much to say, because I think episode 2 is a little bit slower, not in a bad way. I just think that it's taking its time, it's getting there, and we're setting up some plot lines. So we get a Spider-Man reference from Wilson Fisk and Punisher reference as well. The political divide is heating up as well. And then we get a little bit more of this subplot with this the niece of Ben Urich, BB. Is her name BB? I could have sworn. Anyways, the niece of Ben Urich, who is doing all these handheld camera shots and whatnot. She gets to meet Kingpin later. We'll have to see about that. It's right now to be determined, because I just don't know what to make of this subplot and how much air and how much time they're going to give it. So we'll see. Kingpin, though, is really not enjoying the bureaucracy of being mayor. He's like, when do I get to do things? And he's having to go to meetings and whatnot. And we see him kind of fighting back against that a little bit later. And so then we get to some more legal stuff with Daredevil. He has his own practice, right? Like I said, he met Heather. He was set up by Kirsten, his partner, his not, romantic partner, but his actual legal partner now, McDuffie, right? Kirsten McDuffie. And it's not Nelson, Murdoch, and Paige, but I do enjoy Kirsten. I do enjoy Cherry and Matt. I think that they're good. They're not gonna be Foggy and Karen. They're just not. But it's still, it's still fun. And I think that it'll do for now, is what I will say. And I like where we're heading in that direction as well. So there is that. So then we get to the scene where the niece goes to meet Kingpin, and she's kind of cornering him, and Kingpin's like, oh, we can use her. I don't know where we're going with that story. Also with Daniel Blake, it feels a little weird, and it feels a little out of left field. Maybe that was one of the vestiges of the old show. I don't know. I really don't know. Just speculation there. But yeah, we'll see. Then Kingpin shows up and he's like, okay, we got to get the commissioner in our pocket. And he basically does. He threatens him, and he's, the commissioner's like, I know who you are, Kingpin. And Kingpin's like, okay, I'm going to threaten you and you're going to stay on the force. And it's a very, very tenuous, fragile relationship there as well. Also, throughout this entire episode, Matt Murdock is representing a guy who turns out to be the White Tiger. He was trying to save a guy from being beat up. And then it turns out that the guys who were beating him up were police officers, which is really frightening, really scary. And one of the police officers gets hit by the train. And so this guy, turns out he is the White Tiger. And apparently he has a mystical amulet. So we'll see if that has any connections to... I don't know the comic book lore that much, so I don't know what it's connected to in the comics. But in the MCU, who knows? Magical amulet. I immediately thought about Moon Knight, but again, maybe it has nothing to do with Moon Knight. Probably has nothing to do with Moon Knight. But anyways... I think that that'll be something interesting to follow. I think the actor, am I wrong to say that the actor passed away? I think that's what the episode opened with, right? In loving memory of the actor's name. I think it was the White Tiger actor, and if so, rest in peace. That's really tragic, really, really tragic there. But yeah, we have a lot of different subplots going on here. I think that the the ending with the Fisks in couples therapy is super interesting with Matt's new love interest. I wonder what that's going to turn into as well. There's a lot of tension up in the air in episode 2, and I'm just very curious to see how things are going to develop here with the cops being corrupt, and with this reporter girl, and with the Fisks having marital problems maybe, and with Matt representing the White Tiger, and also Muse has to show up eventually. We get hints of Muse throughout the 2 episodes, but then in the end, Matt tracks down that witness, that the guy who White Tiger saved, and we get an awesome action sequence in the apartment where the police officers come and they're like, "Hey, get out of the way," and they start beating up Matt, and I was just cheering, "Get up, Matt! Come on, get up!" Get that Daredevil spirit back, because he does. It's a much more vengeful version of Daredevil, I think, even more so than in like season 3 of Daredevil. And so I think that scream at the end, that's the one that we've heard in all the trailers, but really visceral, which is once again undercut by this pop music that shows up in the credits, and I just don't know for the life of me why they keep doing that. It's really weird. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one who doesn't like it, but I really don't like when pop music just undercuts dramatic moments like that. But anyways, guys, that is it. Daredevil Born Again, episodes 1 and 2. Like I said, really enjoyed episode 1. It started off with a bang, and I'm really sad Foggy's gone, but it's so exciting to see that this show is just, back up to speed, and it's really going for it. Episode 2, like I said, setting up some interesting things, and we'll see where they go. We'll see if these things pay off well, or if they're just kind of going to fall flat later on. I think some of these storylines are a little bit more interesting than others. Like the White Tiger one is very interesting to me. The reporter one with the niece, maybe not as interesting. Again, not super on board with Michael Gandolfini, his character as of yet, but we'll see where that goes from there. Guys, what did you think of episodes 1 and 2 of Daredevil Born Again? Did you love them? Did you hate them? Were you somewhere in the middle? Let me know in the comments, because I'd be super curious to hear, did the premiere live up to your expectations? Because I think for me, I don't know how it could have, because I just had such high expectations, but it got about as close as it could have. And I think that for that, I am really, really excited for the rest of the season. Let me know in the comments down below. And guys, that will do it for episode number 68 of the Access Blockbusters pod. Lots of interesting things this week to talk about. Mickey 17 and Daredevil Born Again. Daredevil Born Again, I'm recording this outro a little bit later, a little bit after I've seen the episodes, but my goodness, I'm just so amazed. And I'm still in the middle of rewatching seasons 1. And like I said, I'm going to try to get through the end of season 3 by the time season 4, I'm going to call it season 4. Season 4 is over, so that I can just go straight into a rewatch of season 4. I'm so excited, guys. But let me know in the comments what you thought about any of the topics. It wasn't as, there weren't as many topics this week to talk about. It's just kind of a slower week in terms of movie news and whatnot, but hopefully we'll pick up again in the coming weeks. And we'll see where we go from here. Guys, thank you so much for listening and watching. As always, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so. Give this video a like and let me know in the comments what you thought. And if you're interested in the audio-only platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, we have it all there. Let me know what you think about it and leave a rating. It would be very much appreciated. Guys, that will do it for me from the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, and I will see you guys in the next one.